housekeeping. And I just want to welcome you all here. This is a very, very important occasion for me. I have actually been dreaming of this for many years now. And I wanted to just explain a little bit why this has been a sort of a dream of mine. I think of it as gathering a family together. And the way I got this sort of a sense of it was that I first became involved in, I first started this journey, I guess, back in 2006, when I became involved with the defense of Yassin Araf. This is my guy right here, Yassin Araf. He was an imam up in Albany, New York, and he was accused of material support for terrorism. And my assignment was to work with him down at the jail for about 6 months. And so I went down, I probably met with him for about 8 hours a week. And during that course of that time, we became very good friends, very close friends. And later, we wrote a book together. I helped him write a book about his life. But after he was convicted, the day after he was convicted, I went in to see him in jail. And of course, I felt horrible about it because I was absolutely convinced at that point that he was innocent and that the government had deliberately framed an innocent man. And he kind of looked at me when I came in and he said, I want to fire you as my lawyer. And he said, I want to hire you as my brother. He said, I don't have any family in the United States, and I just think at this point, I need family more than I need lawyers. And so I kind of took that on. I understood what he was saying, and so I said, okay, I'll be your brother. And as I understood it, it was that he's leaving a wife and 4 children with no income, no visible means of support, and they were going to need a lot of help. Boy, we didn't know how much help they were going to need. It turned into a whole project for a community. And I just remember at one point, we were going out to see him in Pennsylvania, and we were stopping in a motel. And the kids all jumped in the pool, and they swim like fish, and they're just having a great time in the pool, doing all kinds of different strokes and swimming underwater. And I remember the first trip that we took going out to Terre Haute with the kids. And we stopped at a motel, and it had a pool. And the kids had never seen a motel pool before. They'd never been in a pool. And so they all jumped in the pool, and they all started drowning, and I would run around and drag them out of the pool. And slowly, I began to teach them how to swim. And as I was looking at this many years later, how well they were swimming, how they were acting like fish, and I suddenly had this flashback about how much time we had spent on the road together in motel pools. Coming close to drowning on many occasions, but what adventures we'd had. We'd had so many wonderful adventures. This is sort of how involved you can get in a family. Lynn, for example, used to go over every Thursday with a cell phone so that we could talk. Yassin could call to the family because they had no telephone, and they refused to accept the telephone because they were afraid that it was being bugged by, or it was an electronic device, and that had been part of the case. So in order for the kids to have any contact, Lynn would have to go over there. Kathy sued the government to get them green cards. Jean edited 2 books. I mean, there's a whole community of people that were involved in it. And yet, despite all of this, after all this time, this family was not able to be here today. And I really wish that they could have. I think it'd be wonderful. But they're just not ready yet. The trauma is still too great. They're still too afraid to come out. And so one of the points I just wanted to make in this welcome is, I'm so glad that you are here. You are family to me.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
But there is also a lot of others. There are also lots of other people who could not be here today, who are also family to us. And I think I got that insight at some point when Aisha Huda was going to come up and talk about her segment here, organized a conference down at NYU in New York. And she had all of the families down there. How many people were at that? Does anybody remember? We've been to so many conferences now, but it put up the hand. This is the one in New York City at NYU Law School.
March 2009.
March 2009, thank you. All right. At that particular conference, it was sort of organized around the Newburgh 4 and some of the other cases in New York City at that time. But people began to come up as that case was going on, and more people just began to come up out of the audience and began to talk about their cases. And finally, Alicia McWilliams got up at the end, and she said, all right, I want everybody who had a case to come up here. They all came up in front of this big room, and she went down the line and she hugged everybody, and then she turned to the audience and she says, we are all family now. And it was like a light bulb went off in my head. I said, that's what we are. We are all family. So anyway, I just wanted to thank you. This is, to me, what this weekend is about. It is about getting to know who we are as a family. And I'm hoping that as we progress from one of the workshops to another, that sense of a collective pain, we can talk about that, and where do we go with it? What do we do with it? How can we become a voice to change things in a way that we cannot do individually? So I want to just end right there, and we'll have plenty of time to talk later on, but we have one other person that I want to have talk tonight, because one of the things that happened after we'd gotten organized up in Albany, we started an organization to try to identify all of the cases in which there was preemptive prosecution. We understood this had happened with the scene, but we also understood that there were many, many other cases out there. And eventually we made this board here, and you can see we began to list the cases. Right now, it looks like a lot of cases, but there's so many, many cases that aren't even up on the board. And we have to do better on trying to keep it up to date. But that's how many cases we are dealing with. But at some point, we got a call from the Al-Arian family. And they said, we want to do something about this. We like what you're doing. Come on down and join our coalition. And they put together a coalition. And that evolved into the National Coalition to Protect Civil Freedoms. And because the Al-Arian family has been such an integral part of our understanding of how these cases have evolved and what our role in all of this is, that I really wanted Nahla to come up and just talk a little bit about that experience.
Assalamu alaikum. Well, I feel so honored to be here in the company of my fellow sisters and brothers in the struggle for justice. And I feel when I listen to the stories of some of you that my pain and suffering is nothing compared to yours. And like, who am I to come here and talk to you about my experience? But maybe through talking to each other, we can find, inshallah, some hope in finding justice for all of us. So what happened is that in 2003, my husband, Dr. Sami Al-Arian, was arrested by the government, by the FBI, very early in the morning, and he was taken to jail, and he was charged with terrorism charges, so many, like 17, I think. So anyway, that was not really the beginning of our suffering, of our struggle for justice. It started long time before that. In 1997, my own brother, Mazin, Dr. Mazin Al-Najjar, who was living in Tampa, Florida, was arrested by the immigration officers, taken to the FBI building, and he was offered a job, he was offered citizenship, everything he needed, if he testified against my husband. And when he refused to do that, when he refused to be, he said, I have nothing against this man. He is an honorable man, and I have nothing to talk about him, nothing bad, So what did they do? They they kept him imprisoned under the use of secret evidence. That time they called it classified information or evidence. We are the ones who coined this as secret evidence. We started, I remember that time, my kids were young, but my brother was in jail. We have to do something, all of us, Sami and I, and members of our community, and even lawyers and peace activists, and the group became larger and larger every day with new members who really cared about justice. How could the American government that talks about freedom all over the world comes here imprisons people without telling them why they were imprisoned. Well, what is secret evidence? It's evidence that keeps you imprisoned without even you have the right to confront it. This is crazy. It's horrible, so inhumane. So that's what we started in Tampa doing. We established Tampa Bay Coalition for Justice and Freedom, for justice and peace. And we every week we met together, the members of the coalition to discuss what to do with Mazen's case. So what did we do? We tried to educate our own community first of all. So we held so many lectures and symposiums. We invited members of our society from all kinds of fields, like Congress people, like even lawyers, journalists who came and talked about America and the freedoms in America and what's wrong, what's right, what we should do about it. And I remember that time I was in charge of communicating with so many journalists and reporters, and I did that. I was really persistent. I called a columnist many times, left him messages until he responded. And I said to him, my brother is imprisoned under the use of secret evidence. You have to meet with us. You have to talk to us, and we will discuss with you what's going on, and it's not fair. So the guy at last said, okay, come. When we came and we finished talking to him, he said, thank you for your persistence. I'm going to write about it. We managed to make a lot of columnists and editors write, editorials and columns about my brother's case. And that's on one side. Second thing we did was, of course, lobbying in Congress. And this did not happen easily, but we found some Congress people who are good and they cared about justice. So we invited them to come and talk to Mazen, even in jail, to visit Mazen. One of them, Representative David Bonnier, came. He was even a Michigan representative, not from our area at all. But he came all the way to Florida, and the media, of course, covered his visit. So, I mean, we started by inviting Congress people, even donating to them, holding fundraisers for them, until little by little, a lot of them, came into our support, and they even held. I remember Representative Henry Hyde of Michigan, the head of the Judiciary Committee that time. He held 2 testimonies in Congress, and I gave my testimonies there on the use of secret evidence. And you know who the other side was? Only, unfortunately, the Jewish organizations here that defended the use of secret evidence against Muslims and Arabs that time. Even the government did not bring any person to give testimony on its behalf. So anyway, what happened was that later on, after years of work, we managed to even have a project of a bill that was passed by the Judiciary Committee, and we were working also in the Senate until September 11th took place, and of course all our efforts were gone, and the government went crazier even than before. So the point is that with my brother's case, we saw a lot of success. Don't forget that in 2000 he was released by Janet Reno that time because of all the efforts that were done by us, by the journalists who wrote about him, by the Congress people, So that's why I believe that we can work and struggle until we find some solution for our causes here now. I don't think it's the end of the road. We can do a lot, inshallah. Then 2003 came, as I told you. My husband was arrested. The community was terrorized. They talked about, what's his name? Rumsfeld. Talked about the shock and awe policy in Iraq. No, it took place in Tampa too. That was really the policy that scared the Muslim community. We were terrorized when our home was searched very early in the morning. Sami was arrested in a horrible way. He was taken, and the media was waiting as if, they just heard about it. Of course, the FBI told them, long before the arrest took place, they told the media so that they can even scare everyone more and more. So anyway, when Sami was arrested, the community, of course, abandoned us. But I cannot really deny also that there are members of the community that at least secretly supported us and donated to our legal fund. How did we do it? It's with their help. So I understand, as Mel told me that time, she said, Nahla, the community is rightly scared because of all the scare tactics. But we are here for you. We are the ones that are not under attack. And that's our role now, to come in your defense and to be outspoken for you. And that I will never forget, when our brothers and sisters in the community let us down, but God sent us even better people, better friends who were there for us. Mel, did not leave me for one day. Every day she would call me. She was my therapist. She really took good care of me, psychologically. I was going crazy, of course. My kids and I were shouting at each other. We didn't know how to behave, how to treat each other, or handle like everyday things, I took them to the psychologist. And the psychologist said, of course, they took the father, who is like the structure of the house or the base of the house. And now the home has no structure. It's collapsing. And what are you going to do? Learn how to deal with each other little by little. The normal chores we used to do, like everyone knew what to do, we forgot everything, how to do things together, how to do things individually even. We had to learn little by little how to deal with each other. And the most important thing is that I did not allow my kids for one day to lose faith in their father or in the justness of his cause. He didn't do anything wrong. He was fighting for the freedom and for the just cause of Palestine, and we didn't break any law. And the government, if they didn't like what we were doing, it's our right. And we came here to this country, to the land of the free, because we believe the propaganda that there is really freedom here, So the most important thing is that the kids need to be assured that, their fathers, their brothers, anyone, any relative, that they did not do anything wrong. They should always hold their heads high, and from that they should do something about it. Because look at those who are not even related to us, and they are doing a lot for us. Look at Mel, look at, Steve, Fred. There are so many, and then so many people who believe in our causes, and they are really, spending a lot of time and effort to help us and defend us. We have to also do something about it. We cannot just sit quietly and give up and be lazy and no, we have a cause, and we have to do everything we can to fight and fight and fight. And remember, you're not the only ones who went through this. The African American community went through hell. And before that, also the Native Americans and the Italians afterwards. Everybody, every new community in America that is weak and powerless, they went through what we are going through. And they had to struggle and fight back. And that's what we have to do. We cannot just, as I said, give in. God gave us this life to struggle for justice, to do what is right. And this is the real test. Yes, we are being tested, and it's not easy. But look at the reward. If not in this life, but the life hereafter, God willing. And second thing is that those who did injustice to us, also we will find punishment. If not in this life, in the life hereafter. So hope is what keeps us going. This is very important. Hope in the justness of God. God is fair and just, and He will not let us down. He wants us to work hard. He wants us to fight back, and we will do our best. And what I want you to do also is to reach out as much as you can to the non-Muslim community. These are your brothers and sisters, and there are so many good people out there. And never forget those journalists that we met in our trial. Even now, after all these years, they are still our friends. And they care about us, and they come and visit as friends, not as reporters or journalists. Just to try to write to a good columnist, you know, you have to read the newspapers in your area. You have to see which ones who really have a conscience, who is fair-minded, and go and meet him or her. And try to talk about your cause and about your imprisoned loved ones. You have to keep the cause alive. You cannot just sleep on it. You know, this is very, very important. I don't know, Layla, if Layla can remind me of some other things. But that's why also this coalition was established. My husband got out of jail under house arrest, he is now. But he didn't forget about his fellow prisoners. And he wanted to do something, you know, with, of course, you know, all the great work Brother Steve is doing and everyone else. The objective of this coalition is to keep the struggle alive and to even do more and more and reach out, as I said, for other people, other organizations, anyone who wants to help. Let's look for those people. Don't sit down and wait for them to come to you. You know, the coalition, inshallah, God willing, will grow even larger and larger and will be much stronger. And one of the objectives of the coalition is also to lobby, inshallah. Lobbying is very, very important. And we can do wonderful things in the Congress. There are good people there. Not all of them are bad and corrupt and this and that. No, there are good people who have a conscience. We have to focus on that too. And inshallah, there will be, as I said, you know, a resolution to our problems little by little, and we will be stronger. Jazakumullah. Thank you.
Wow, with an advocate like that, who needs lawyers? I just wanted to quickly introduce the staff that is going to work here for this weekend. Mel, raise your hand. Mel Underbaki and Fred Bryant. They started with the Al-Arian family down in Florida, and they've been championing his cause, and then they moved over, and they're now championing everybody's cause, and they're doing it as much with education. Mel goes around the country organizing educational events, and she's been phenomenal at it. And Fred films them, right? Plus a lot of other logistics that are equally important. So they're very, very important to this coalition. Lynn, of course, is with Project Salam, and she does a lot of work with the database, working with Kathy Manley on the database, trying to record all the information about all of these various prisoners, keep it up to date so that we have up-to-date information. And she is very involved with our family up there, as well as with, I have to say, she just adopts families, families that she cares about. She can't help herself.
Posters.
Oh, yes. One of the things we've been doing, one of the projects, is you'll notice around the room there are some posters here that we've made. And the idea was to try to humanize things. If you see just the name, and then you listen to the press reports, it all sounds very heavy. If people knew what the truth was about these people, and the fact that they're real people with real families and phony charges, you would change. So we've been making these posters, and I know around the room there are probably people here who are looking in vain for their loved one, and they don't see him. And if that is the case, we want to make sure that before you leave today, before you leave the weekend, that we've tried to make a poster for him. One of the things we wanted to do is to make sure that we did not put any poster up there that was not approved by the families. And so that's why it's been slow in coming, because we just have had not enough access to all of the families. So if you look around, if you don't see a poster there, come to us, we'll sit down, we'll try to write up some text that you can approve, we'll get a family, we've got a picture there. And Lynn is actually so good, she brought her printer, and we're going to print one right up before the weekend is over, right?
Yep.
Okay. So that's one more thing that we can do, and I really hope that you can do that. And also, I just want to point out Charmine. She is the director of our Prisoner and Family Committee. You all know her. I don't think anybody here doesn't know her, but she is just phenomenal. She has done so much to organize the prisoners and the families and get contact with people in prisons where nobody else has been doing it, and I cannot thank you enough, Charmaine.
Prison rights. So we were trying to do things that were, kind of against the grain. So we started a TV show, we started a radio show, we started a soup kitchen, we, did every project that you can imagine. We were really the only ones in the community doing it at the time. 3 years into the program, one of our volunteers decided to become an FBI informant. We think it happened when him and another brother went camping at Big Bend National Park. This is the park between Mexico and Texas. This is in Houston, Texas, by the way, where this took place. I think I said that, but and I think that he might have brought a knife or something. I don't think you're supposed to bring a knife into the park. And I guess on their way back they got stopped and they were let go by the authorities. And at some point, this particular guy, his name is Jim Coates, either he was going to be pressed to be convicted on some charge or something, whatever it was. We knew he was also under some kind of financial pressures, which usually informants are. And his background was kind of checkered. He came from like a neo-Nazi. He was a convert or a revert to Islam. So he had like this neo-Nazi, weird, white supremacist type background. And for whatever reason, he decided to become an FBI informant. So here he is now with us for 2 years straight, working with the FBI, recording us, video surveillance, the FBI out in the outskirts. If we're at a Starbucks, they're across the street recording us. And slowly he starts to try to militarize our group. So we go from being, a strictly humanitarian, nonviolent, social justice group to a group where we start to question, what is our true place in this country? Here we are, we're Muslim Americans, we're fighting for justice. The imams aren't doing anything, the masjids are half empty most of the time. Empty space, we're talking about building another mosque for $10 million when we don't have a single youth group. So we can put some fancy dome on the mosque. We're wasting money, wasting efforts. Who are we as Muslim Americans? What should our boundary be when it comes to engaging in social justice? So we start having these questions, which most youth will always have these questions. It's a concept of being a young person, to start questioning your purpose and your place and how dedicated are you to the cause. The problem comes is when you have an FBI informant there instigating and slowly swerving the conversation towards militarizing yourselves. So the conversation starts to lean towards, well, maybe we should go overseas and fight. We know these wars are unjust. Maybe we should go to Fallujah. Maybe we should go to Palestine. Sounds natural. Muslims are being killed, and not just Muslims, Arabs, people are being killed unjustly. Our tax dollars are buying bullets that are killing innocent people. What should our place be? Do we just stop paying taxes? Or do we go overseas and fight? How dedicated are we? So fortunate or unfortunate, however you want to look at it, I always worked in the media. I worked for the local CBS affiliate there. I was, had a great job, morning chief editor. My battle was always, through the pen, per se. If I was going to shoot anything, it was going to be through a camera. So I have an outlet. I wasn't, I guess you could say I'm kind of more the way a terrorist might be to a certain extent, because most real terrorists won't fall for an FBI plot. They won't fall for some kind of scheme to do something that's obviously, a shady thing. You won't meet somebody on Facebook and say, you know what, I should partner up with this guy and go blow up a building, which is what most of these cases are kind of like. They're targeting people that would never be terrorists. So I had an outlet, so I was already kind of involved. I'm sorry if I'm kind of stumbling my words here. I'm not really a good public speaker. But, I had an outlet, so, I wasn't there for all the meetings, and the FBI informant knew that as well, what my place was. So he knew that, obviously the best way he could entrap these guys is that if he kept me out of the picture. So they would start meeting separately away from me. They would do everything they can to make sure I wasn't there engaging in the conversations, because I had, I never really trusted the guy, but, he was a Muslim, he was a brother, he was, he was working, he was trying his best to be involved, so, but I never really trusted him. I never really felt that he was sincere person trying to work for the cause alone. He was always looking for ways to try to create that volunteer job into a paid position so he can get paid to do the work. So it wasn't just out of like the best intention of his heart. So I never really felt comfortable with him. So I used to have arguments with him all the time that, look, our fight is here, as Americans. I'm not a pacifist per se. I believe that you should take arms in the case of self-defense. But as American and as a Muslim, we have a tremendous opportunity to do so much good. You know, there's a list that we'll never even get through. If you want to really stand for justice, you'll never even get through the list if you just focus on nonviolent strategies. So they obviously took me out of that conversation. He later brought a friend along to the meetings, who later on we found out was an actual FBI informant. He was with us for about a year. And he got the guys to be convinced to start planning and considering going overseas. No plan was really put in place, like most of these cases, you know. No real strategy. These guys didn't have the money, they didn't have the resources. The government, of course, was there to conveniently help them out with the resources, providing them the guns, providing them the shooting range. They started training, started considering going overseas. They did everything legal, though. They went and got gun permits. They followed the law. But of course, when you're on a student visa, which two of these guys were on, you're not allowed to have a firearm. Of course, they didn't know that, because you can go register a gun, you can go to the classes, you can purchase the gun, and it seems to be legal. But nobody knows that except the FBI. So of course, they have a checklist of things they try to put their potential, you know, suspects through to make sure they can have a clean case. So these guys, at the end of the day, they considered going overseas. One of the guys in the group, Kobe Williams, his name's, I believe, up there, he really is one of the most beautiful people you'll ever meet in your life. And like every one of these brothers and sisters, they usually are, because they're the most sincere people you've ever met. And I still know Kobe, and I was there to meet him when he got out of prison. He was realizing that, look, Jim, I think, is an FBI informant. I'm going to go turn myself in. And I used to tell him, you know, what are you going to turn yourself in for? What'd you do? And he said, you know what, I got to tell you the truth. You know, I really wanted to go overseas and fight. I said, but Kobe, what did you do? I mean, wanting to go overseas and fight, that's one thing. I want to go overseas and fight, you know, but what does that mean? I mean, you didn't do anything. He says, well, you know, I know what I want to do. You know, I'm going to go turn myself in. You know, so we couldn't convince him not to do it. He went and did it. And the day after he did that, everybody else got arrested in the group except me. FBI informant left, the FBI agent left, and now I'm the only one out of jail, you know, for a good few months, just waiting to get arrested, you know, to think, okay, when are they going to come after me? So it took about a couple months later, finally I got a business card on my car from the FBI saying, you know, we'd like to meet with you. We were going to talk to you a couple of days before, but you're always with your kids. I have 3 kids from a previous marriage. So we didn't approach you, you know, that was very sweet of them to not approach me around my kids. But, you know, whatever. So they decided they finally wanted to meet me. And of course, the reason they wanted to meet me is to try to gather more information, because these cases are still ongoing. So I met with them. I did, of course, what we're always taught to not do, which is to go meet with the FBI without representation, but I did it anyways. I met them in the Starbucks, and the very first thing they said to me, they said, look, Hany, look, we've been watching you for 2 years. We know exactly what you believe. We know exactly where you stand. This isn't about you, you know. We just want to better understand this case. And I said, look, if you want to better understand this case, you should have spoke to me a long time ago. I mean, and if you want to better understand this case, you would maybe consider that maybe you know that these guys aren't really violent criminals. And instead of working hard to entrap these guys, maybe you should have worked hard to rehabilitate their ways of thinking and their ideology. If they're a little bit off track because they're confused about their identity, maybe this is a great opportunity for you to make some really great citizens and further protect this country instead of further degrade the protection of this country. So we got into a little discussion and this and that, and I knew what they were there for, which is to collect information. So I was very careful not to, you know, to play their game. So, but anyways, to get to the end of the story, basically these guys went to prison. They all tried to fight it. They later pleaded out. Kobe got 4 years. You know, some people, you know, might say that he is, you know, that he made a serious mistake. A what? Yeah, a snitch, or he, you know, I mean, he did the best that he could. You know, he shouldn't have went and turned himself in. He should have got representation. There should have, but he was a very compassionate, emotional person, so he thought what he was doing was right, but he didn't realize what he did was, in essence, say that everybody was guilty in the group. So he got 4 years, he got out. Since he's now going through a recovery phase, trying to figure out what his place is. He's been, you know, not really ostracized in the community, but like every one of you know that Muslims, you know, we're so vulnerable as people. You know, we don't really realize that, you know, that our strength comes in numbers, our strength comes in unity, it comes in reflecting on the movements from the past, like this quote here from Martin Luther King Jr., that, you know, that when you stand up for an injustice, you know, whether it's injustice towards you or anybody, you're standing up for everybody. You know, and I know that's why Steve and Len and everybody that works for this group that aren't Muslim or aren't directly connected through some kind of religious ideology, you know, they understand this. You know, this isn't about religion, it's not about ideology, it's about, you know, a human quality, a human concept. And, you know, fortunately, you know, working with Aisha, you know, we've realized that you know, as a young person, and I'm sorry if I'm rambling too long now.
No, fine, go ahead.
As a young person, when I was growing up, you know, I only got involved myself in the typical things, you know, in the Islamic issues, organizing the community towards youth programs, basketball tournaments, some volunteer activity, charity work, you know, not realizing that there's a difference between charity and justice, that sometimes charity is not actually helping like you think it is, you know, because you're not getting to the root cause of the issues. So fortunately, working with Aisha, we've come to the conclusion that, look, young people, and this, when we say young, we're saying between 11 and 30, 40, 50, I mean, all of us really, but really we're focusing on those younger members in our community that don't really understand their true place, their true worth. They're kind of conflicted with their identity. And this isn't a religious-based program, but we're trying to focus around the Muslim community and communities of color because they're the ones that are being affected by the same types of issues. You know, and it doesn't matter if you're talking about the prison industrial complex or, you know, this situation like this with entrapment. So our efforts really are just to let people know, you know, young people to know that, look, you have a place and it's much bigger than you ever can imagine. And if you just slow down and have the opportunity to break down who you are, you know, what is your true self-worth, and start learning all the different tools and all the different resources that are out there that can help you to really empower yourself, you can start creating that shift. We can start building that critical mass that's needed to actually start weighing in. And Fred was mentioning earlier, like he was saying that, you know, if you don't mind me saying this, but he was saying how he thinks, you know, potentially that, you know, that next American Revolution or that next real uprising might come from the South, you know, from the Latin American communities, you know, across the border of Mexico. And it makes sense because, you know, if you think about here in the United States, we know that the Latin community is growing. You know, soon Republicans will be a dying breed. I mean, the Republican Party won't exist anymore because Texas is going to shift over eventually, and at some point there's just going to be no hope for those that are on the right. So we have to keep understanding that as we keep growing, people keep migrating, and they keep, you know, evolving here as Americans. If we just stay true to what we believe our values are, and this is when I start to ramble, it doesn't make any sense. Basically, look, we're trying to do something to get youth to understand their true worth, and not just understand it, but actually have the tools to actually make things happen.
Thank you.
So.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Sorry.
You know, Hany, for somebody who doesn't do any public speaking, you could go on all night. And I remember the first time I had a real conversation with you, it was Kathy's Cafe. We were up in Albany, and you started to describe this story, and I was absolutely mesmerized by it. And it completely changed the way I thought about it, how seductive this idea is of somehow trying to change the world. All we have to do is take up go and fight. And somehow fighting is going to change the world. And that it starts initially with being peaceful within yourself, and then seeing the ways that you can change the world by being peaceful. And you were so determined right back then. This was before I think even Aisha was in the picture. Maybe she was secretly in the picture, but I didn't know about it. But you were so determined then to build this program, and I'm so proud of you guys for going ahead, not giving up, keeping working on it, and you really got it now to the point where I think it's going to be a great success. It's just a terrific idea. I want to do one exercise before we stop tonight, and this is what I'd like you to do. Is it possible to get into groups of 6?
Maybe we could stay within our
And actually what I was hoping to do was if you could get together with people that you don't know. In other words, if you have a family of 6, don't do it within the family. Try to get up and move around a little bit. What I'd like is also to have each table, each group, have a secretary, a reporter, somebody who can just record information. All right, what I would like now is for you to talk about this topic. During all of the time of difficulty that you went through, what was one thing that you found helpful? One thing that you found that made life easier or more helpful? And so what I'd like is just as you go around, now what I'm going to do is I have a little bell here and I'm going to ring it every 5 minutes. And every 5 minutes, somebody else gets a chance to talk and tell what they found was helpful. And then at the end, I'd like just the secretaries who take these information down to come in and talk about what the group as a whole found. We don't have to use names, But I wanted to collect the wisdom of the group on what they found helpful. This is useful for NCPCF, but it is also, I think, useful and helpful to learn to talk to each other about these kind of experiences. So I have this little bell here. I'm going to ring it in just a minute. I just want to tell you a little bit about this bell. My father died when I was 3 years old. He was in World War II. And since he was fighting in North Africa, I never saw him. I barely saw him. And I don't remember him. I had no recollection of him at all. My mother tells me that around Christmas of 1944, an officer came up and knocked on the door and presented her with a package. And in that package, although the censors had removed all the letters and everything else in it, was a series of little presents for each one of the members of the family. And this was the present that I got. It was a little bell, somewhere probably in Morocco. And he died shortly afterwards, and this is the only tangible thing I ever got from him. And so I treasure it. I keep it on my mantelpiece to remind me. And I just wanted to use this bell tonight because it's a way of remembering that even though people are very dear to you, are not present, they're still important in your life. During my lifetime, as I grew up with my mother. She never remarried. We just had this small family. And there were many times during my life where I was going off in the wrong direction. I was using bad judgment. I was the typical teenager or the typical young man that doesn't have his priorities straight. But I always had the sense that I was being led somehow at the last minute by someone putting me back on the right path. I had a sense my father was still caring about me, still sort of leading me in the right direction. And so that is part of what we're talking about here, that we all have loved ones who aren't here. But that doesn't mean that they don't have to be important in your life. I'm 70 years old, and I still treasure my father, who I never knew. So, if you could please just pick out somebody to start, and then I will wait 5 minutes, and I'll ring the bell, and then you go to the next person. Okay? Does that sound like a plan?
And you're saying anything that's has been helpful so far?
What has been helpful to you in getting through these difficulties? Okay? So.